Game reviews can be incredibly helpful when deciding which games to spend your time playing, but sometimes critics get it wrong. And sometimes reviews come from IGN, and they're always wrong. When this happens, you might miss out on great games. So, I've dumpster dived through the critical review trash heap to pull out 15 insanely underrated games that were trashed by critics. I put links to any full reviews just below the like button, but for now, let's dive in. First up is Alien Colonial Marines, one of the best games ever too. Nah, that game sucked and got the thrashing it deserved. But a game that absolutely didn't deserve the criticism was Days Gone. Released in 2019 by Bend Studio, Days Gone is an open-world action-adventure game with RPG elements set in a post-apocalyptic Oregon, where a global pandemic has turned much of the population into zombie-like creatures called Freakers. You follow Deacon St. John, a former outlaw turned drifter and bounty hunter, as he navigates a harsh world filled with danger, searching for a reason to keep going after the loss of his wife Sarah. The game combines exploration, survival mechanics, and visceral combat. You must scavenge for resources, craft weapons, and maintain Deacon's motorcycle, which serves as both transportation and a lifeline in the sprawling hostile wilderness. Without a doubt, the standout feature is the massive hordes of freakers that chase you in relentless waves, requiring tactical thinking and environmental awareness to survive. There's nothing more butt-clenching than hundreds of freakers all thirsting for your face, flowing like an avalanche over the land in their endless pursuit of your soft insides. With its atmospheric world, solid emotional storytelling, and intense layered gameplay, the critics were ruthless. They criticized the mission design, the slow-paced beginning, and technical issues at launch. And yeah, while launch bugs can sour any first impressions, they were quickly smoothed out, yet the damage was done. There were also a lot of comparisons with The Last of Us, and sure, both are set in a type of zombie apocalypse, but the games couldn't be any more different. Over time, as more players started to experience this game, it started to develop a cult following, and rightly so. I can't recommend Days Gone highly enough for its immersive open world, emotional depth, intense survival elements, and rock-hard butt cheeks from all the clenching. If you haven't played this game, you owe it to yourself to journey through its bleak, unforgiving world. Next up is Spec Ops: The Line. Developed by Jaeger and released in 2012, Spec Ops: The Line is a third-person shooter that subverts expectations by delivering a thought-provoking and unsettling narrative about the psychological horrors of war. The game follows Captain Martin Walker and his squad as they enter a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai to investigate the disappearance of Colonel John Conrad and his unit. What begins as a straightforward rescue mission quickly spirals into chaos, forcing Walker to confront brutal moral dilemmas and question his sanity. The gameplay has solid, if not revolutionary, tactical cover-based shooting, with squad commands along intense firefights in environments affected by shifting sand, which especially for 2012 was really impressive. But what sets Spec Ops: The Line apart is its narrative, and how it weaves heavy themes inspired by Apocalypse Now and Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. As the story progresses, Walker's decisions become increasingly disturbing, and the game challenges your perception of heroism and morality, raising questions about the true nature of violence and war. It then turns the mirror on you, forcing you to face your own beliefs. The critics didn't really get it. They just saw this as a cookie-cutter shooter in a sea of other cookie-cutter shooters. But that couldn't be further from the truth. It took some time, but eventually people started to realize the brilliance of this game. The standard shooting mechanics were part of the point. That, coupled with the inward reflection of the story, carries a strong emotional weight that leaves a lasting impression on you. Spec Ops: The Line stands out as a unique experience, remembered not for its gunplay, but for its daring exploration of the psychological costs of war, making it one of the most thought-provoking shooters ever made.
I can smell your
Moving on to a game the critics wanted dead, and that's Wanted Dead. Released in 2023 by Soleil Limited, a company made up of former Team Ninja members, so they know a thing or two about tough-as-nails action games. Wanted Dead blends third-person shooting with hack-and-slash combat. Set in a dystopian Hong Kong, you follow Lieutenant Hannah Stone, a hardened member of an elite police force called Zombie Unit, as she unravels a corporate conspiracy. With a mix of cyberpunk and 80s action movie vibes, the game offers a unique visual style and quirky narrative. You've got a ragtag group of cops, the police chief who's always yelling at everyone.
You won't be able to see the light of day once that badge is taken away from you.
And the enemies that are way over the top in the best way. Gameplay is fast and brutal, requiring you to switch between ranged gunfights and close-quarter swordplay, and the occasional chainsaw thrown in for good measure. Precision is key, with mechanics like parries, finishers, and tactical reloads. The combat encourages aggression and quick reactions, but it can be punishing, demanding patience and mastery, which is probably the reason it got such a cold critical reception. You know, the whole get good thing. Most of the negative reviews centered on the overall difficulty, with some steep spikes. There were also some criticisms about wanting more mechanical depth, and IGN's review stood out because they just couldn't get over the lack of air combos. Yeah, now this was partially addressed with a big post-launch update that rebalanced some of the mechanics and updated the skill tree, though IGN likely still isn't happy. You know, still no air combos. However, many players, and myself included, appreciated Wanted Dead's throwback feel, quirky charm, and chaotic action. Its unapologetic focus on old-school design, complete with cheesy cutscenes and offbeat minigames, has earned it a small but passionate cult following. For players seeking something different and nostalgic, Wanted Dead delivers an unconventional, challenging experience. With a mix of humor, style, and chaos. Just don't expect air combos. Next up is Mad Max. Developed by Avalanche Studios and released in 2015, Mad Max is an open-world action-adventure game set in the post-apocalyptic wasteland made famous by the Mad Max films. You step into the worn leather boots of Max, a lone warrior seeking revenge and survival after his car, the iconic Interceptor, is stolen. Teaming up with a freakish mechanic named Chum Bucket, Max builds the ultimate vehicle, the Magnum Opus, to take on ruthless warlords and reclaim his freedom. The gameplay is a blend of vehicular combat, melee brawls, and open-world exploration. You can upgrade Max's abilities and the Magnum Opus with scavenged parts, enhancing armor, weapons, and performance. Driving combat plays a major role, with you ramming enemies off the road, using harpoons, and blasting wasteland scum with shotguns. On foot, hand-to-hand combat uses a gritty combo-based system similar to the Batman Arkham series, emphasizing brutal takedowns and counters. The game's atmospheric world, filled with abandoned ruins, sandstorms, and hostile factions, captures the desolation of the Mad Max universe. Most of the criticisms focused on the thin story, repetitive mission structure, and familiar combat system. But, and this is a big juicy but, when you take a step back, Mad Max is bigger than the sum of its parts. The exceptional world building, vehicular mechanics, and immersive visuals create an experience that feels like nothing else. It's not a revolution, but Mad Max is way better than the critics would have you believe. It's thrilling and immersive with awesome vehicular mayhem and gritty combat, making it a must-play for fans of the films and open-world adventure games. Moving on to the Callisto Protocol. Oh, where to even begin with this one? Released in 2022 by Striking Distance Studios, the Callisto Protocol is a survival horror game set in a distant future, where you take on the role of Jacob Lee, a prisoner trapped in a nightmarish black iron prison on Jupiter's moon, Callisto. The atmosphere is steeped in tension and dread, with claustrophobic environments and grotesque biophage creatures lurking around every corner. Gameplay focuses heavily on melee combat, mixing it with guns and tactical dodging to keep encounters up close and brutal. You manage scarce resources while navigating through tight corridors and solving environmental puzzles. The cinematic presentation and impressive visuals are simply stunning, immersing you in this alien world, with a heavy focus on sound design to heighten tension. While critics praised the presentation, they were relentless in bashing the gameplay. Complaints included the linear level design, technical issues, and that tactical dodge mechanic. This is another case where launch bugs, even after they were fixed, left a lasting mark on the game. But the biggest issue, without a doubt, was the comparisons to Dead Space. Striking Distance Studios was made up of former Dead Space devs, and given the horrors in space setting of Callisto, it's understandable that many expected a spiritual successor to Dead Space, even when the development team went out of their way to dispel that comparison before launch.
Different characters, different universe, different way we tell the story. We go really deep on story. The combat is different, enemies are different. I can't see people going, oh, that's Dead Space 4.
And when it turned out to be something quite different, people were disappointed. I have a whole video about the botched launch that I recommend you check out. Now, if you judge the game on its own merits, it's fantastic. It's a visually stunning horror experience that establishes a new sci-fi franchise that will now never get a second chance. Okay, let's talk about The Evil Within. Released in 2014 by Tango Gameworks and directed by the legendary Shinji Mikami, The Evil Within is a survival horror game that blends psychological terror with gruesome action. You take the role of Detective Sebastian Castellanos, who's drawn into a nightmarish world after investigating a brutal mass murder. As reality warps around him, Sebastian must survive encounters with grotesque creatures, deadly traps, and a sinister force known as Ruvik, while uncovering the dark truth behind the chaos. Not surprising from the creator of Resident Evil himself, the gameplay is pure survival horror, requiring you to strategically manage your limited ammunition, health, and resources as you navigate hostile environments. The mix of stealth, combat, puzzle solving, and exploration adds depth, while an upgrade system allows you to enhance Sebastian's abilities over time. The haunting atmosphere is brought to life by eerie visuals, disturbing enemy designs, and dynamic environments that shift without warning, keeping you constantly on edge. While the critics slam the pacing, convoluted story, and occasional technical issues, The Evil Within has become a cult favorite among horror fans for delivering a mix of brutal survival mechanics and psychological horror. Overall, The Evil Within is a tense, immersive horror experience that tests both your nerves and your ability to think on your feet in a twisted, nightmarish world. Up next is Immortals of Aveum. Developed by Ascendant Studios and released in 2023, Immortals of Aveum is a first-person magical shooter that blends fast-paced combat with high fantasy storytelling. Set in a world locked in an eternal war called the Everwar, you take on the role of Jack, an unlikely hero who discovers he is a powerful triarch, capable of wielding all three types of magic: force, chaos, and life. As part of the Immortals, an elite order of battle mages, Jack must master his abilities to stop a tyrant from consuming the realm in darkness. The gameplay focuses on using spellcasting instead of guns, creating a fresh take on the FPS genre. You chain together spells for fast, fluid combat while navigating enemy-filled environments, solving puzzles, and unlocking powerful upgrades. The beautiful, vibrant world offers a mix of linear levels and semi-open areas, encouraging exploration. While the game received rough reviews due to inconsistent pacing, repetitive combat, and some technical issues, Immortals of Aveum is absolutely worth checking out. With its ambitious scope, incredible visuals, solid world building, and fun magic mechanics, this game is perfect for anyone looking for a fresh take on the shooter genre.
The Industrial Revolution.
Moving now to The Order 1886. Released in 2015 by Ready at Dawn, The Order 1886 is a third-person action-adventure game set in an alternate history of Victorian London. You follow Sir Galahad, a knight of the Ancient Order tasked with defending humanity from supernatural threats like werewolves. The game blends historical fiction with steampunk aesthetics, featuring advanced technology like electric weapons and airships within its 19th century setting. The gameplay focuses on cinematic storytelling, with a mix of cover-based shooting, melee combat, and quick-time events. The game is all about immersing you in this world, with its stunning visuals, lifelike character models, and atmospheric environments that blur the line between gameplay and cutscenes. The biggest criticisms were focused on its short length, with a heavy focus on the narrative, which is understandable when considering the full cost of the game at launch. But after a decade, you can pick this game up for cheap, so the value is less questionable these days. And these days, I welcome tight gaming experiences. In the end, the story is totally unique, the visuals are still amazing, and the gameplay is a good time. So if you've ever been curious, I recommend you give The Order 1886 a go. Moving on to one of Remedy Entertainment's forgotten gems. Yeah, the studio behind Alan Wake and Control put out a game in between those. Of course, I'm talking about Quantum Break. Released in 2016 and exclusive to Xbox, Quantum Break is a unique blend of third-person shooter and live-action storytelling. Yeah, there's really nothing else quite like Quantum Break. The game follows Jack Joyce, who gains time manipulation powers after a failed experiment with a time machine. I hate when that happens. As time fractures and reality becomes unstable, Jack must confront his former friend Paul Serene, now an antagonist with his own time-bending abilities, and stop the end of time itself. The game plays a mix of fast-paced combat and puzzle solving, using Jack's time powers to freeze enemies, dodge bullets, and manipulate objects. You combine traditional shooting mechanics with abilities like time shields and explosive blasts, making for these flashy, chaotic combat scenarios. The story unfolds through both in-game action and live-action TV episodes, with your choices influencing how the narrative branches. It was super ambitious, and maybe even too ambitious at times. Most of the criticism centered on the live-action sections, and yeah, I probably would have preferred all in-engine cutscenes, but they're not terrible by any means, and it was really interesting to see how things would change based on your decisions. Even now, the game is visually impressive, with big set pieces, like when a huge ship crashes into a bridge and time fractures all over the place. It's a shame that Quantum Break has largely been forgotten due to the criticisms. Just like pretty much everything else Remedy puts out, it has a feel all its own. It's a thoroughly entertaining mix of sci-fi action and storytelling told in a bold, experimental way.
I once trusted Jack more than anybody. It was my only chance to make him understand the truth.
The fuck do you mean?
Next is Vampyr. Developed by Don't Nod Entertainment in 2018, Vampyr is an action RPG set in a dark, atmospheric rendition of 1918 London during the Spanish flu pandemic. You assume the role of Dr. Jonathan Reed, a renowned physician who's recently been turned into a vampire. Or vampire? I don't know. As both healer and predator, Reed grapples with his newfound thirst for blood, while searching for a cure to save the city from the plague, and himself from the curse. The game's core tension lies in its moral choices. Reed can feed on citizens to grow stronger, but every life taken has consequences, shaping the city's fate and storyline. The system encourages you to carefully weigh whether to spare or sacrifice people, as killing characters provides experience points, but can lead to chaos in the city's districts. Combat combines melee attacks, firearms, and vampire abilities like teleportation and blood magic, making for fast-paced encounters against humans and supernatural enemies. While Vampyr was praised for its engaging narrative, rich atmosphere, and complex moral dilemmas, critics said the combat was repetitive and harped on the technical issues at launch. However, this is such an interesting and engaging vampire experience, and worth playing for its narrative ambition immersing you in a haunting gothic world where every choice counts.
It is the curse of the goddess. It is the hunger in you. The need for blood.
Okay, let's talk about Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. Just rolls off the tongue. Developed by Team Ninja and released in 2022, Stranger of Paradise offers a reimagining of the original Final Fantasy through the lens of an action RPG. The game follows Jack Garland and his companions who are consumed by a desire to destroy chaos.
Chaos, 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 chaos.
A mysterious force threatening their world. As the story unfolds, Jack's quest takes unexpected twists, eventually revealing connections to the larger Final Fantasy mythos in surprising ways. The gameplay focuses on fast-paced, challenging combat, somewhat reminiscent of Nioh, with deep job-based mechanics. You can switch between various jobs like Warrior, Mage, and Dragoon, each with its own abilities, weapons, and playstyles. Combat rewards aggressive tactics as you deplete enemy break gauges to execute cinematic finishers. It just looks and feels so damn cool. The customization options allow for flexible builds, encouraging experimentation with different gear and jobs. A lot of the criticism centered on the uneven narrative and cringy dialogue. But the gameplay more than makes up for those small rough edges, with its depth, satisfying combat, and engaging challenge. The game embraces chaos, both narratively and mechanically, offering fans of action RPGs a fresh yet nostalgic take on the Final Fantasy universe. Up next is Scorn. Developed by Ebb Software and released in 2022, Scorn is a first-person horror adventure game set in a grotesque, biomechanical world heavily inspired by the works of H.R. Giger and Zdzislaw Beksinski. The game immerses you in an unsettling, surreal environment where organic and mechanical elements blend seamlessly, creating a nightmarish landscape very much like your mom's room. Without dialogue or a traditional story, Scorn relies on environmental storytelling and abstract visuals to convey its cryptic narrative, leaving a lot open to interpretation. Now, this is largely a puzzle game, with a heavy focus on exploring the otherworldly environments and some light combat. You carefully navigate eerie corridors, solving intricate environmental puzzles using strange organic tools and weapons that feel alive. It reminds me a lot of the Cronenberg movie Existenz. Anyone? No? Okay. Combat is intentionally slow and sparse, heightening tension and forcing you to manage limited resources, while fending off bizarre creatures lurking in the decaying halls. This is another case where critics assumed the game was something other than what it turned out to be. It's not a survival horror game with a heavy focus on managing resources and combat like so many wanted. This is an intentionally obtuse horror game that prioritizes world building, atmosphere, and its unique art direction in a slow-paced and ambiguous puzzle-focused adventure. For those who know what the game is trying to do and are open to its minimalist design, this is a truly captivating experience. Ultimately, Scorn stands out as a haunting, visually arresting experience for those seeking a surreal and unsettling journey through a nightmarish world. Moving now to Deadly Premonition. Yes, developed by Axis Games and released in 2010. Deadly Premonition is a cult classic in the truest sense. This survival horror game blends psychological thriller elements with the most zany and quirky open-world exploration. You control FBI agent Francis York Morgan, sent to the rural town of Greenvale to investigate a brutal murder with supernatural undertones. The comparisons to Twin Peaks aren't exactly subtle, with its eccentric characters, surreal moments, and mix of horror, humor, and mystery. The gameplay combines third-person shooting mechanics, puzzle solving, and investigation. York explores the town, questions locals, and fights bizarre creatures in eerie otherworld sequences. You also manage York's health, hunger, and mental state, while navigating Greenvale's dynamic day-night cycle and weather, which influence the availability of side quests and other events. While I and maybe 10 other people love Deadly Premonition for its charming weirdness, far too many people only saw the criticisms about clunky controls, outdated visuals, and technical issues. And this is one of those rare instances where the criticisms were all true, but despite its flaws, the game's unique tone, memorable characters, and unpredictable plot have earned it a passionate fanbase, cementing it as a polarizing survival horror gem. Next up is a game called Anime Dark Souls with Code Vein. Developed by Bandai Namco and released in 2019, Code Vein is an action RPG that blends challenging Souls-like mechanics with anime-inspired visuals. Yeah, so maybe the nickname is pretty spot on. In a post-apocalyptic world, the game follows revenants, vampiric beings cursed with immortality and bloodlust, who must fight monstrous creatures known as the Lost, while seeking to uncover their fragmented memories. The character customization is one of the best in all of gaming, with a huge number of options to make your character totally unique. And that's not to mention all of the ways you can build and spec out your character, who's accompanied by AI-controlled partners, each with unique abilities and personalities. Gameplay emphasizes tough Souls-like combat, with a focus on managing stamina, dodging enemy attacks, and mastering timing. The blood code system is absolutely rad, allowing you to switch between classes on the fly, unlocking new skills, magic, and weapon proficiencies, encouraging flexible playstyles. There's also cooperative multiplayer, so you and your friends, or strangers on the internet, can team up against tough bosses. The biggest criticisms were on the uneven difficulty and story. And I have to say, it's pretty funny to criticize the story in a Souls-like. I mean, we all know how much these games focus on telling a coherent story. For those who've played Code Vein, you know just how incredible this game is, with its deep customization, engaging combat, and striking art direction. If you like challenging RPGs and are looking for a unique take on the Souls-like formula, with its own sense of style, you should check out Code Vein. Last is a game that eventually reached greatness with Vampyr the Masquerade Bloodlines. Released in 2004 by Troika Games, this cult classic RPG blends immersive storytelling, deep character customization, and the dark world of vampire politics. Set in modern-day Los Angeles, you take on the role of a newly turned vampire and must navigate the dangerous web of the city's undead society. The almost infinite flexibility is what's so impressive, offering multiple clans to choose from, each with unique abilities and dialogue options that impact how the story unfolds. Gameplay combines first and third-person perspectives with a mix of combat, stealth, and diplomacy. You can develop supernatural abilities, called disciplines, and make moral choices that influence the story's branching paths. With its richly detailed world, complex characters, intrigue, and a gripping main storyline involving ancient vampire artifacts and internal power struggles, is absolutely captivating for those who've experienced it. Though, Bloodlines launched with a metric shit ton of bugs and piss-poor sales. Over time, fan patches have polished the game, smoothing out the issues and fully realizing the original vision. Unhindered by launch issues, the game could then be appreciated for its mature themes and total freedom, cementing it as a beloved and influential RPG that stands tall as one of the greats. And that's 15 insanely underrated games that were trashed by critics. What game did I miss? Let me know. If you liked the video, hit like, drop a comment, and of course subscribe. And if you want more of my gaming thoughts, check out my video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.